I had just recently made a video on how to make a chair pad, and I had gotten to about that stage at the end of the last video. I have not sewn the back yet, and I ended up adding a second braid, so that this is now roughly 10 inches wide. And what I'm going to do is extend this chair pad into a larger item of a rug. So as you can see, I've made 2 strands for the next braid. I have more yarn here, but I'm almost out of the black and red. So what I'll be doing in this video, I'm going to show you how I joined 2 braids, which is a little different than I had said in the first video. And then what I'm going to do is start braiding what I have left of the black and red. I'm going to add the red and white that has the homespun in it, and I am then going to knit all of that yarn. So what we're essentially doing is changing colors, and this will end up being the center of the rug, and the next rounds of the rug will be red and white. And as you use up your yarns, you can color coordinate this any way. You could start with pastels in the center and then move out toward darker fabrics. You could do the opposite. So this is a continuing project going from a chair pad to a larger item that may end up being a small rug. What I want to show you first here is how I sewed 2 braids together. In the other video, I had explained that when you come to an end of a braid, this would be tucked under like that, and the new braid would come out of here. And that, it does make it a little bit of a bump there. And I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually a bump over here. And what I did was sew 2 braids together by machine and then trim them. And I used, excuse me, one of my electric machines, and I took the ends of one end of each braid, put them together, and just sewed them together. And as I sew this in place, I can tack that down even further. But especially if this is a rug and that gets stepped on all the time, it's no larger a bump than I would end up over here if I layered the end of a braid in and the start of a new braid out. So that's an option for attaching braids to each other if you're making either a chair pad or a rug. I am now at the point where I am about to change colors, and I have sewn the bottom of the chair pad. This is the top that you see there. I have stitched the bottom the way that I explained in the first video I did, and there is a little bit of a bump in the center, but overall it's lying flat. And this is about 10 inches in diameter now, and I want to keep adding to it. And so what I had done was I have 2 strands knit ready for the next braid. One is the black and red, and one is red and white with the homespun wool. And I was using up the black and red yarn. I am now just about at the end of that yarn, and to change colors, I am simply going to add this onto the end of this. So this strand, when I'm finished with it, to make it the same length as the other 2, at the very end of it is going to be just red and white. Then from this point on, I'm only going to be using red and white. And because I have stitched it this way, what I can do now is I'll finish knitting that, changing the color. I will add the next braid, and I can again use either method of adding the next braid. I can tuck this under like this and stitch it in place and start the next braid right there, or I can machine sew this to the next braid and keep it straight and just keep going. And as this progresses now, it will have the colors of red and white, and the other yarns that I have are mainly reds that I have in bulky weight. So this would, if I kept going and made this into a rug, this will end up being a rug that's mostly red with other color accents. But stitching it to at least this point, now when I go to add the next braid, I'll pin that braid, stitch that braid in place, so that from this point on it's complete as far as I've gone. And whenever I add a new braid, I'll stitch that braid in place, like I said, and continue adding it like that. And that way, when you get to a size that you like, you can just stop, and you don't have to go back to the beginning and start the stitching. It makes it a little bit more portable as well. So that's what I'm doing now. I'll be adding this color to the yarn I have. I'll be switching to the red and white, and that we will see how that shows up once I get the next braid on. It'll be very subtle because it'll only be the end of one strand, but it does give just a subtle lead into the next color. In other words, switching to the red and white won't be as abrupt by doing that. You can see here how that last strand came out right here. These colors would have been like the other braids that I've been doing, but like I said, I have now changed color, and I'm going to braid this starting at the other end, make the other end the beginning of the braid, attach it to the chair pad item that I have, and this will be the end of the braid. And so at the very end of the braid, I'll have more red and white than I will black and red. And that, like I said, will make a more subtle change into the red and white. I've taken that last braid and laid it in place before I sew the ends at all. And you can see this is the very subtle color change right here. But what I wanted to point out here was this braid is about 5 feet long, maybe a little bit longer. And it's only going around the chair pad 1 1/4 times. And that's what you have to keep in mind as you do this, that if you're using the same length strands and braids, as your item gets bigger, it's going to go around less and less and less. So you can either increase the length of your strands and then braids. You could, at this point, maybe do 10-foot strands and 10-foot braids. You want to keep it in mind as if you're making a rug. This is the beginning, this is the end, or the beginning and that's the end. The next braid is going to be closer together like that if I keep them the same length. So you would end up with a staggered effect until one braid would only go around once. And then you would have to increase the length, or you would have a braid that only goes around less than once. So you want to keep that in mind as you're doing this. But that's the very subtle color change here. And the next braid will be all red and white. And we'll see how that looks when I add the next braid. I've been working on the chair pad that's becoming a rug. And these are going to be the next colors I use. This is a 10-foot strand that I've just finished knitting. and I'm starting the next strand in these colors, and I will have 2 of these and 1 of these for the next braid that goes on this project. I've been continuing to work on my chair pad that is getting bigger and becoming a rug, and for a couple of days I've just been knitting when I can, and I have 3 strands ready, as you can see here, ready to be braided, which I'm going to do now and add to it. Now these 3 will be the color change that I'll be doing with this piece. So there are the colors that we're at now, and this braid here has more white in it than red and black at the end, and this next braid will have the white and a totally new color. So I'm going to braid this together. These 3 strands, just so you know, because the whole item is getting bigger, I didn't want to knit strands and then braid them and only be able to go about halfway around or maybe 1 time around the item. So these are 10-foot strands that I am going to braid, and they will end up being just under 10 feet when I get them done. And these are basically the colors I have left for this project. Will be the white and hand-spun wool that I've been using, and this is red and like a grayish brown. So those are the colors that I'll continue to add to this. But what I'm going to show you is after I get this braided, I will add it to the chair pad rug and show you how the color change looks when you gradually change colors like that by adding a little bit of your main color at the end of your last braid, and then more of your main color, making this your main color for the next braid. Before I show you how I'm going to add that braid to the other project, I wanted to show you 2 other examples of chair pads. Now this is a small one, and this is done in worsted weight yarns, and I may add to this one. And that's the beauty of these, is because I did this a while ago, and I can just start adding to it. I would just use the same weight braid, and like I said, this is worsted weight. Now when I put this one together, I did it a little bit too tightly, and I think you can see how it sticks up a little bit or is tending to pop up in the center. I haven't pressed this one. The smaller you make them, the more likely it's going to be to do that. Now this one, this one is made with a looser knit braid. I may have used the Boy double-ended spool knitter for this one. I know it's partially hand-spun Navajo Shiro wool. It's thick, but it's not as thick as the one that I'm working on now. And again, it's the same idea where I can add to either of those at any time. This one I would press before I started to make it bigger. And even though right now it's red, white, blue, and green, I could actually pick up any one of those colors and add braids, say, in the green. And I would end up with a center and then a green, say, a rug around it. I could do the same thing with this one, and I could even pick up on the brown and have a red center and then a brown rug. So it's really kind of fun using your scrap yarns in different ways to make these. And another idea is that these don't have to be chair pads. If you did one in browns and oranges and yellows, you could easily use this as a centerpiece placemat at, say, Thanksgiving. Obviously, red, white, and green for Christmas. There are a lot of places you can use these that maybe you haven't thought of. Okay, I'm ready to start pinning the braid in place. And what I've done is machine stitch it to the end of the last braid I had on there. Now, in the previous braids, I had, for the most part, 2 braids of commercial worsted weight yarn that made a bulky weight strand to go into the braid. On this latest braid I've done, I only have 1 strand that is commercial yarn, and I have 2 strands that have homespun in them, and you may be able to see that that makes the braid itself thicker enough so that it may stick up higher than the other part of the rug. So what I'm going to do is put the camera down, and I'm going to pin this in place, and we'll see how far around it goes. Okay, it went around 2.5 times, just about. I'm trying to find the beginning. The beginning is right here of the new braid, so almost 3 times, closer to 2.5. Now that is a 5-foot braid, a 7-foot braid, and a 10-foot braid. And as I've been progressing on this, I'm making the braids longer because the item itself is getting bigger. So with those 3 braid sizes, this is now just about 17 inches in diameter. It's large enough to make, you could put a rug like this next to the bed. You know, for getting out of bed in the morning, this would make a nice rug. It would make a nice rug at the kitchen sink or the bathroom sink. It would make a nice area rug if you had 3 or 4 of these and you threw them around on the floor of a living room with wood floors. They would add nice color and an accent. There's an awful lot of things that you can do with this, but as you can see, it does take a lot of yarn. It's very easy to do. It's a little bit time consuming as it gets bigger. And I think I just have the 1 ball of this color left, and I have a couple of these which are the red and brown. I can put it on here, the colors show up better with some blue in the picture. And then I have just a small amount of that I'm going to also work in somehow. So I'll do the next strand or strands of this, probably 10 foot again, to get to the end of that. And then I will be using just this, and I think I have 3 balls of that. So by the time I finish the whole thing, it will be this color, which happens to be from the other chair pad, and I'm sticking this one in the picture just so the camera picks up more than just red. But it'll probably go to this color, which is similar to this yarn, not the same, but similar. So you can see that I've started with the dark, and I've gone to a light, and then I'm going to a medium. And so as I use this yarn up and finish this rug, it's really going to be on a red theme, but it's going to have different tones and hues of a red overall when you put it on the floor. And if it's 17 inches now, it'll probably end up being about maybe 26 or 27 inches when I'm done. And that's a fairly good size rug. And like I said, they're very versatile, and by using scrap yarns and using your imagination with different colors, you really can make very nice handmade gifts for yourself or for other people. And one other thing I do want to mention, this size at 17 inches in diameter, this is big enough for my dog, who is 20 pounds, to curl up on. She would love this because of the thickness and because it's wool. It's wool and wool blend. It's very warm. I do have wood floors, and this could be a pet bed very easily. In fact, You might find that if you have these on the floor throughout the house, it's where your animals are.